All right, guys, let's kick it off. So, as Justin was saying, this is the second part of our security boot camp. For those that couldn't join, or just to kind of recap, last week we talked about the network and network detection and response, how the perimeter is really where you want to start. Moving on from the perimeter inside, now we want to start talking about devices and antivirus. And that leads into talking about XDR. Another acronym. God, what do all these mean? What are we talking about here? So what I really want to talk about is the evolution, how we want to move past just traditional endpoint protection and really move on to where, not just where the future is, but where we need to be from a threat detection perspective. So let's jump right in. All right, the evolution of endpoint protection. As most of you know, even before, and I'm dating myself, I do this a lot, even before there was email, there were devices. There was computers with non-color displays that still had access to the internet and things. For those of you that are really old, you'll remember Yahooligans before it was Yahoo. I always laugh at that one. But you needed to be able to protect that device from the things that were coming from the internet and from the perimeter. So there was that understanding and need that you needed to be able to protect your devices if there was a threat. Now, like the first bullet, that's reactive. Antivirus was reactive because it was constantly scanning. If something entered the device, was downloaded, it would scan that, potentially identify it as a threat. You could quarantine it. You could go ahead and make sure that, yes, you know that threat is contained. The next step above that came a couple years ago was endpoint detection and response. It was the evolution and the next step from just a traditional antivirus because it wasn't just looking at signature-based attacks. This huge dictionary of known threats. It was now looking for, and I hate using buzzwords, but potential zero-day threats. Threats that we have not seen before, but are identifying it because of behavior. We know how typical files, typical humans act. And if a typical programs and humans, but if a typical program or human acts outside of that nature, EDR is going to jump in and take action. All right. If we see a program that's encrypting thousands and thousands of files within seconds, that's typically how ransomware acts. Now, there are some programs that act like that, but 99% of the time it's ransomware. So that's kind of the evolution to EDR. And now that next step up is XDR. And I will tell you guys a funny story. So when XDR came out a couple years ago, I, again, was doing my research into it. And to this day, there is still not a very clear definition of XDR. Extended detection response means anything above the endpoint, anything outside of the endpoint that you're pulling in. And that's why we're really focusing on what it's doing, not the definition of it, because it's a little murky. But what is it doing? It's pulling in data points from your endpoint, from your network, from identity and access management tools, right? Who you are, and then from your third-party tools. This is the power of the XDR, is that it's pulling all of these tools in, and we want to really focus on that. I'll make you guys laugh again. I got really heavy into the shield and lock images for this one, so you're going to see a couple of those here. But we want to focus on this slide is why detection alone isn't protection. If you guys remember back to last week, all right, we're talking about how typically you would go ahead and purchase a firewall, you would configure the firewall, and then you would think, okay, I'm protected. I don't need to worry about anything from a network perimeter perspective. That's not the way of the world anymore, right? You can't just say, okay, it's good. Just like detection and understanding what threats are happening on the device is not how you can go ahead and protect yourself moving forward. That might protect you today, but it's not going to do anything tomorrow or down the line next year, 2 years. You need to have that information correlated with the other parts of your network, the other parts of your environment, whether that's your Microsoft 365 or Google, whether that's your Amazon Web Services. You need to have those pieces of data in the same place correlated together. and not just a human looking at all of these logs. That's how it was in the past. We can't have that anymore. The new threat landscape, all right, is crazy, and it's changing every day. Some people might not even know the term that I'm speaking of in that top left, fileless malware. People are like, excuse my language, Joe, what the hell is fileless malware? I thought malware was on a file. So what are you talking about? And this is malware that can execute itself on the device and on system processes. So it's a way an attacker can put a payload down or send code to get into the device and then steal credentials like the next to the right. This is where we start to see, all right, you're exploiting of those API keys, getting access to those clouds, and then the lateral movement, moving to other devices on the network, potentially servers, where you could go ahead and pull data out of the network. This is where, like I said, guys, attackers are utilizing things like artificial intelligence and machine learning to get smarter and smarter. We have to be smarter. We can't look at things in a silo. If you remember last week, I talked about how we want cybersecurity to be like a Venn diagram. You want to make sure that you have these overlaps because you don't want those gaps. Because there are so many of them when we talk about what a typical environment is. We spoke ad nauseum already, but firewalls protect the interior, but the perimeter, but it doesn't know what's going on in the interior. EDR tools are great at looking at devices, but it's not going to understand those network-based threats. A SIM tool can aggregate this all together, but someone needs to look at that or configure the rules for it to really understand what's going on. There are so many blind spots here that just having data in one place, just having human eyes on all of the different tools is not enough. You need a tool that's actually going to correlate this information together. And I specify the term correlate because that's not just data dumping everything into one huge, large Excel file. To say that, oh, I have all my data in one place. It's in one database. I don't have to worry about it. That's not enough. That's not where you have an actual program or software understanding the information. That second bullet, normalizing, enriching, and prioritizing the alerts. You could go to any SOC team in the world and they will tell you having data all in one place is not enough, right? Having everything just in this giant bucket is great if you need to check a box from a cyber insurance or a compliance standpoint, but to make it actionable, right, to turn it into a story, you need something like an XDR to understand it and normalize it, all right? How is XDR changing the game? It's unifying all of these tools together. If you remember, again, from last week, one of the slides is how can you build a robust cybersecurity practice with the least amount of tools? This is how you're going to do it with tools like a network detection response tool, your endpoint tool, your cloud tools, and then something like an XDR to pull it all together, right? AI, machine learning, I hate using buzzwords, but it's the name of the game, guys. It is what's looking at these and understanding the patterns that we're going to miss. I'll be honest, all right? I use ChatGPT for a lot of things. I call it my sidekick, the Robin to my Batman. If it's listening to this, it might get upset about that. So we're both Batman, but it's going to be helping us to understand those patterns to put that data together, right? The idea is, and I want to jump to that last bullet, right? Turning alert chasing into instant response. We want to be able to act on these threats, not just be looking at alerts all day, every day. We need to be proactive. And the only way that we're going to do it is with tools that's going to understand all of this data. And again, I like making jokes. So if you guys remember last week, I had a real world example. So now this is also how it works. All right. You get that phishing email, someone trying to expose your credentials. The endpoint that appears to be clean. All right. You have your EDR that's actively scanning the device. It doesn't detect anything. Now, what the XDR is going to do, it's going to look at email. It's going to look at Microsoft 365. It's going to look at the endpoint and look at logs, not just the information coming from the EDR. It's going to look at the network. It's going to put all these together and give the information to the SOC to act. Now, talking about this, some of you might be worried, well, where does automatic remediation come in? How, like, what's that time from the XDR to correlate that information and then to present it to the SOC? There's always going to be some part where a human is going to be valuable in this process, because a human is going to be able to understand where AI machine learning could just look at it at 0 and 1. The human is going to understand additional context with it. It's going to maybe reach out to boots on the ground, the IT team in the environment, to understand, hey, is this user traveling? Might be able to get a little bit more information. Might understand rules of engagement on how the customer wants to act. So I don't want you guys to think that adding a human element is going to throw a monkey wrench into all of this. It's just that, hey, you have autopilot in a plane, you still have a pilot there. There's still someone that's going to assist the AI and the tools with what it's doing. And that's really what stage 4 is all about. We're going to be able to help you to understand what's going on and take that action. Again, another shield, but it's okay. Everything's cool. But how are we going to build an effective XDR strategy? So kind of just looking at the XDR. And you want to be able to piece together all of these different components that we spoke about. All right. We want to go ahead and pull in everything that you're using from your existing tools. Excuse me. We don't necessarily want to replace it. A lot of times when you're talking about cybersecurity, everyone immediately goes to, oh my God, I just invested so much money into this last year. I can't think about replacing this right now. Please don't even talk to me. And that's not what we want to do. We want to talk about augmenting it, enhancing it, how we're going to make that tool work better for you. I know you invested so much money into that, and that's absolutely fine. Let's make you more of a rock star, more of a hero to your environment. How it's going to correlate that information with that information with that to bring that picture together. So also when you're having these conversations, don't think like, oh my God, I'm going to bring this up. My customer is going to hate me because I just sold them something 6 months ago and now I'm trying to sell them something else. You're not trying to sell them another tool. You're trying to add onto their stack. You're trying to build their cybersecurity strategy. Think about it like that. Don't think about it that, oh my God, I'm trying to sell them another service. They're never going to talk to me again. All right. You want to be able to build that with them. You want to be their trusted advisor, their partner. That's what I've built my career on. For anyone that's been on sales calls with me, you guys will know I first will ask questions. I'm never going to just come in firing with our solutions, because we want to be able to solve their problems, not shove services and products down their throats. That's never going to work. You want to build that strategy with them. You want to help them today, tomorrow, and 3 years down the line. All right. And that's what building this strategy, XDR, NDR, SD-WAN, MDR, all these pieces that we're going to be teaching you next week, the week after, they're all building into what your security strategy is going to be. All right, let's talk about the future. Let's talk about what we're actually looking towards. AI-driven predictive understanding of the threats. Providing AI the insight to the different avenues a threat can enter can help it to understand the behavioral processes of those different, I want to use the term kind of pipes. So how that data can move to get into the environment. And having AI understand all that, it can help to predict the behavior. Because at the end of the day, everything is behavior. How we're acting with our computers, how the data is interacting between our computers and the cloud, how we're interacting with a VPN, it's all behavior. So having AI to understand it is going to help it to understand even more of those, and again, I hate using that term, zero-day threats. All right, those threats that we have not seen before, but we're understanding the behavior. We're, again, unifying that data to make it actionable, not just in that bucket, and continually to improve it. One of the things I had on the last slide was talking about playbooks, was talking about how we can make all of our teams better. AI and data together is going to help SOC teams to remediate threats faster. Then the SOC team can help to train those boots on the ground to understand and not panic when certain things happen. And one of the biggest, I would say, priorities of a security team is to help reduce anxiety, is to help reduce the panic when something happens. When we want to go ahead and go and be like, oh my God, let's just pull everything from the network because we don't know what's going on. No, let's actually look at it and let's understand what those threats are. Now, a very short plug, but talking about Command Links XDR, because we do understand where these next level threats are coming from, these next generation. So we do want to build on a lot of these, not just terms, but a lot of these avenues. So Command Links XDR is device-based. We are going to be looking at, as I mentioned before, some of those things that typical EDR and endpoint agents are going to miss, those system processes. We're going to integrate with tools that you already have, your Microsoft, your SentinelOne, Cato, all of these pieces, and so much more to build that multi-layered correlation. It's going to send that information to our SOC team for them to take certain actions that they can with these tools, as well as, again, giving those boots on the ground some ways to act. I'll give you guys a great example. All right. Last week, our SOC team with our XDR detected fileless malware. And I am not just, and that is just very convenient timing that we can talk about it, but it is a use case and we're building a case study on it because it's just a great understanding, not just for Command Link, but things that you guys can research on your own. I would love for you guys to all take homework and each of you look up one example of fileless malware so that you guys can see and have that oh no moment that, yeah, you do need these additional tools. And again, guys, I don't want you to be nervous that you're going to be going into all of your customers to saying, oh God, I'm selling them something else. No, you have to sell them on the idea that all of these tools work together. All right. All of them are building blocks on each other to build this cybersecurity defense for your customers, for yourselves. And that is enough ranting for me. So let's go ahead and let's move it over to some questions. So I'm going to pop open the chat here. And let's see, what do we got? Jenny, will XDR slow down a network? And if so, how do I avoid creating bottlenecks? Now, XDR is not an XDR tool typically will not slow down a network because the data that is going to be transmitting is logs. And there are going to be safeguards put in place to help with that. That being said, there is always a chance that there is going to be certain utilization spikes depending on what's going on. That's where having an XDR and some type of network monitoring together is very important so that you can have a network operations center and a security operations center working together. Dale, so if a customer has their own stack of various CPE and software, can this be added as a standalone? Absolutely. Now, this can be added to help bolster their environment. Michael, with XDR, is a SIM tool necessary? That depends on the XDR tool that you're using. So I can't say just a blanket statement, yes. Most XDR tools will act as a SIM to correlate the information together, but that's really on a case-by-case basis. And happy to take it offline with you. Anyone here, you guys know, if you have any security questions, I'm a resource to you. I'm happy to speak to you guys on any specific tools that you have and work with that. What's next with XDR beyond just watching endpoints and networks? Brian, I would say what's next is what we spoke about here. Let me just bring that up. I would say that right here, all right, what XDR is really going to lean in on is to help with those predictive models while it's pulling in all of that data and all that information from different threat vectors. So I really think what it's going to start doing is you're going to have behavioral models on how a user in Microsoft 365 works from a device to VPN to Microsoft perspective. I think that's where XDR is going to go, where it's going to start building out these playbooks and these threat detection responses around specific scenarios. Any other questions? Jenny, how close are we to having XDR tie in directly to identity systems so it can react based on actually who's logging in? Honestly, right now, certain XDR systems can integrate with identity and access management tools, as well as Active Directory with Microsoft and identity with Google to understand this. The problem with that is those tools aren't necessarily analyzing behavior. They're just looking at, well, this user logged in from this place. So it's still going to be on the XDR or the correlation tool to look at that history of that user. So when we're talking about those identity tools, they're going to send everything to the XDR. And the XDR needs to understand and correlate that behavior, not just with logins, because an example, all right, Mason Miles, the CRO of CommandLink, is on this call. All right, Mason travels all the time. How do we know that Mason's behavior is logging in from the U.S. and he's not maybe traveling to a customer in Taipei or in London or in Italy? Now, we need to understand that, and an XDR alone isn't going to be able to see that because it's initially going to flag it as suspicious because that's the first time we're seeing Mason in Italy. But our SOC, now the XDR is going to bring that information to our SOC team. Our SOC team is going to be like, oh, we know Mason is traveling. Let me just ping him, make sure everything's okay. Yeah, everything's okay. All right, you know what? Let's just keep an eye on Mason's behavior, make sure nothing happens to his devices. So there's always needs to be that human element that's still going to understand this behavior, even though we initially see it as, okay, that's going to be something suspicious. Does that help? I mean, I rambled a little bit there because I wanted to get kind of the full picture, but does that help? Any other questions on that, Jenny? Perfect. Any other questions, guys? Brian, I know you touched on this, but what part of the threat detection do you think humans will still be best at? Honestly, I still think it's those one-off kind of behavioral anomalies where we see maybe one piece, or we see maybe someone logging in from a place, or we see a file that has the right naming convention but is acting a little differently than it should. Because remember, if we're talking about endpoint detection and response and antivirus, it's going to look at behavior and it's going to look at that known list of threats. So both of those could look at it and see that it's okay. But maybe a human looks at it and be like, well, this was downloaded at 3 a.m. when that user is typically asleep. So yeah, this program isn't acting abnormal yet. And yeah, there are no threats yet, but I want to take a deeper look at it. So I still think a human is going to be in best where we see those kind of like one-offs. And that's where AI eventually is going to get to, understanding all of these different threat vectors itself. Do you think we'll ever see XDR predict and stop an attack before it's even discovered publicly? That is sure. I am not an expert on like AI and predictive models to say that, but it is absolutely possible. I don't want to use the term Skynet, but you know what? We'll move on from that. Anything else, guys? Any other questions? Well, gang, again, to Justin's point earlier, I really, really want to thank everyone here. I want to thank everyone that's left these questions. It is super, super valuable to hear the questions from you guys. It's going to help us to build out so much content for you moving forward. We're gonna have these recordings on demand, the presentations, things just for customers, things specific to the partner community. I'm really excited where we're taking this and looking forward for Dom, our VP of Solutions Engineering, to talk to you guys about SASE and SD-WAN next week.